Independence Day, released in 1996, is not just a disaster blockbuster, it is a historic milestone that completely transformed the landscape of science fiction cinema in Hollywood. With its breathtaking destruction sequences, star-studded cast, and unprecedented production scale, the work of director Roland Emmerich has become a pop culture icon of the 90s. However, behind those epic scenes that left the whole world breathless, did you know that the making of the film was a series of hilarious situations, bold decisions, and unexpected incidents that all contributed to its perfection on screen? Today, let us peel back the curtain to discover 15 little-known secrets and unique incidents that have made Independence Day immortal. Right now, let us begin the journey back in time to 1996 to reach our first secret. Number 1. The disgusting alien slime was actually lubricating gel. One of the funniest and most unbelievable details behind Independence Day was the disgusting slime covering the alien bodies. When watching the movie in 1996, many viewers felt genuinely uncomfortable every time the aliens appeared. The shiny, slimy skin, the drops of mucus glistening under the lights, all made them look terrifyingly lifelike. But few people know that the secret behind that horror effect was extremely ordinary, and also extremely Hollywood. To create that signature wet look for the aliens, the makeup team used a massive amount of KY lubricating gel. That is right, the exact product sold in pharmacies for sensitive personal purposes. According to many crew members, the set often looked more like a bizarre laboratory than a summer blockbuster shoot. Effects specialists had to constantly pour more gel onto the alien suits to keep the surface shiny under the scorching studio lights. The interesting thing is that such manual solutions created the very distinct cinematic magic of 1990s Hollywood. This was an era when CGI had not yet completely dominated. Filmmakers had to be creative with real materials, real props, and dozens of crazy behind-the-scenes tricks. And perhaps that is why, even today, whenever we rewatch Independence Day, those alien creatures still feel real, slimy, and scary in a way that many modern movies struggle to recreate. Number 2. Vindicating the movie's silliest plot hole that was mocked for decades. For nearly 30 years, there is a detail in Independence Day that audiences have always teased as the silliest scientific plot hole in Hollywood history. That is the moment the character of Jeff Goldblum uses a Mac laptop to upload an Earth computer virus into the alien mothership system. To many, this idea sounds ridiculously absurd. The thought that alien technology, millions of years more advanced than humanity, could be defeated by a 1996 computer is truly hard to believe. But the interesting thing is that the film actually had a very logical explanation. In the original script, there was a 7-minute scene explaining that after the Roswell incident in 1947, the American government secretly recovered a crashed alien spacecraft. And by studying that alien technology, humans gradually reverse engineered it to develop modern computer systems. In other words, human technology and alien technology shared the same origin, so they were compatible from the start. If that footage had been kept, it is highly likely that Independence Day would have avoided one of its most famous controversies. But, unfortunately, to shorten the runtime and keep a faster pace for the summer theatrical release, this explanation was ultimately cut entirely. And that is also very characteristic of Hollywood during the VHS and DVD era. There are behind-the-scenes secrets that audiences only discover years later. Suddenly, a detail that was mocked for decades turned out to have an explanation from the very beginning. It is just that we never got to see it on the big screen. Number 3. Recalling the scene of extracting a decayed tooth for acting, one of the things that keeps Independence Day appealing even today is that the emotional feelings of the characters are always very real, amidst a film full of spaceships and explosions. And perhaps no scene shows that more clearly than the moment President Whitmore has his mind invaded by the alien using telepathic powers through the laboratory glass. It was an extremely difficult scene to act. The character had almost no dialogue. Everything depended entirely on his eyes, facial expressions, and the feeling of agonizing pain being suffocated from the inside. If overacted, the scene would become comical. But if underacted, the audience would not feel the terror the character was experiencing, and Bill Pullman found his own unique way to bring that emotion to the screen. According to many behind-the-scenes stories, the actor tried to recall the most painful memory he had ever experienced in real life. The feeling of helplessness and horror when having to extract a severely infected, decayed tooth. He remembered the aching pain running through his body, the sound of dental tools echoing near his ear, and the feeling of being unable to do anything but endure. It was that very memory that helped him create the trembling, authentic expression in the scene. Perhaps this is also what makes 1990s cinema so special. Before the era of CGI and motion capture dominance, many actors still had to rely on real memories, real pain, and real emotions to make the audience believe in things that were not real. And thanks to that, that scene still makes viewers feel chills in a very human way today. Number 4, the legendary speech that saved the movie title. There are lines of dialogue in Hollywood history that go far beyond the limits of a single film. They become a part of the cultural memory for an entire generation. And with Independence Day, the moment President Whitmore stands before the pilots, delivering the final speech before the survival battle of humanity, is exactly such a moment. The interesting thing is that this legendary speech not only saved the spirit of the characters in the movie, but also accidentally saved the title of the film in real life. Initially, Fox executives did not really like the name Independence Day. Some executives thought it was too simple, too patriotic, and sounded more like a special holiday television program than a multi-million-dollar sci-fi blockbuster. They wanted to change it to names that sounded more modern and cool for easier international promotion. But writer Dean Devlin and director Roland Emmerich were extremely determined to keep the original name. And then they came up with a very smart move. At the end of the famous speech by President Whitmore, they added a highly emotional closing line. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. That moment immediately made the entire meaning of the name Independence Day stronger than ever. It was no longer just an American holiday, but became the day all of humanity stood up together against extinction. This tactic was so successful that Fox could no longer change the name of the film, and it is interesting to think back. Sometimes just one right line at the right time is enough to change the fate of an entire Hollywood blockbuster. Number 5, the White House set was a hand-me-down. One of the most interesting things about Hollywood is that cinematic magic is sometimes created from extremely ordinary things, including recycling old props. And Independence Day has a very typical behind-the-scenes example of that. When watching the movie, many viewers believed that the White House interior was built entirely for the film. Everything from the Oval Office to the corridors of power looked incredibly convincing. But the truth is that most of that set was actually borrowed from the movie The American President, released a year earlier. Hollywood in the 1990s often had extremely pragmatic habits like that. If a movie had already built a beautiful and detailed set, why not reuse it to save millions of dollars? The funny thing is that the journey of this set did not stop there. Right after Independence Day finished filming, it was passed on to the movie Mars Attacks, a satirical sci-fi comedy also released in 1996. In a way, the same fake White House witnessed 3 completely different versions of America in just 2 years. A political romance, a patriotic apocalyptic blockbuster, and a crazy satirical alien movie. Perhaps that is also what was so endearing about old-school Hollywood. Behind the multi-million-dollar movies, there were sometimes very simple money-saving tricks that audiences never noticed. Number 6. The Super Bowl commercial changed the film industry. Today, a blockbuster trailer appearing at the Super Bowl is almost a given. But in 1996, that was still a crazily risky gamble. Independence Day was the movie that changed everything. At that time, Fox decided to spend about $1.3 million to buy an ad slot during the Super Bowl, the television broadcast with the largest audience in America. This was a massive number at the time, especially for a sci-fi movie that no one knew for sure would succeed or fail. Many in the industry thought the studio was being too reckless. But then the trailer aired. American audiences saw for the first time the image of a giant flying saucer covering cities, destructive laser beams, and especially the scene of the White House exploding, a moment that left almost the entire country stunned in front of their TV screens. The effect was almost immediate. Overnight, Independence Day became the movie everyone was talking about everywhere. Television shows discussed it, newspapers analyzed every frame, and audiences counted the days until summer to go to the theaters. Most importantly, Hollywood realized something huge. The Super Bowl does not just sell soda or cars, it can also sell cinematic dreams. Since then, advertising blockbuster movies at the Super Bowl gradually became a tradition lasting for decades. From Star Wars to Marvel, almost every major film franchise later followed the path that Independence Day once paved. And it is interesting to think that just a trailer lasting a few dozen seconds on a football night in 1996 was powerful enough to change how Hollywood promotes movies forever. Number 7. The not big enough curse for Kevin Spacey. Hollywood is always full of casting decisions that make people wonder what would happen if. And Independence Day also has a story like that. Before Bill Pullman became the charismatic and inspiring President Whitmore, this role was once considered for Kevin Spacey. Today, that sounds unbelievable, because Spacey later became one of the most famous actors in Hollywood with 2 Oscar statues in his career. But in the mid-1990s, things were completely different. According to many behind-the-scenes sources, the Fox executives at that time did not believe Kevin Spacey was capable of carrying a massive-scale summer blockbuster. They thought he was too strange, too inclined toward internalized acting, and lacked the energy of a classic Hollywood mainstream star. In short, they did not think he had what it takes to be a box office superstar, and so the role ultimately went to Bill Pullman. The interesting thing is, looking back today, that decision created a very unique kind of history. Bill Pullman gave Whitmore the feeling of an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary circumstances. He was not too polished, not too much of a movie star. But that is exactly what made the final speech of the film strangely sincere. As for Kevin Spacey, just a few years later, he continuously won major roles and became one of the most powerful names in Hollywood. That is also the interesting thing about cinema. Sometimes, just a small casting decision can completely change the emotion of an entire movie that millions of people will remember for decades. Number 8. The alien body-dragging scene was 100% real emotion. If there is one scene in Independence Day that has made audiences laugh and remember for years, it is definitely the moment Captain Hiller, played by Will Smith, drags the alien corpse across the desert, grumbling in annoyance as he walks. On screen, it looks like a perfectly timed comedic display, true to the character. But the interesting thing is that most of the emotion in that scene was completely real. The background was shot near the Great Salt Lake area, a place known for its incredibly strong odor at certain times of the year. When the film crew arrived to shoot, millions of dead brine shrimp washed ashore in the summer heat, creating an almost unbearable fishy stench. The atmosphere on set at that time was so genuinely harsh that many crew members had to constantly pinch their noses between takes. And that is also why the reaction of Will Smith in this segment became strangely natural. The grumbling, the frustrated eyes, the way he dragged the alien corpse as if he was going crazy with everything around him were not entirely scripted. A large part came from the fact that he was genuinely trying to endure the terrible smell of the filming location. Perhaps that is also what makes audiences love 1990s cinema so much. Many of the most memorable moments do not come from perfect visual effects, but from very human, very real reactions. And in the case of Independence Day, the horrible smell of the Great Salt Lake accidentally created one of the most iconic comedic scenes of the film. Number 9. Boycotted by rebels because of a peace message. What made Independence Day a special phenomenon was not just about explosions or aliens, but also about the very simple yet emotional message the film wanted to convey. When humanity faces the apocalypse, all borders and hatreds ultimately become meaningless. But interestingly, that very message once caused fierce controversy in real life. In the final part of the film, there is a very short segment, but with strong symbolic meaning, the Israeli army and Arab forces cooperating to fight against the aliens. For American audiences in the 1990s, it was a hopeful image, a dream that a disaster could make people unite regardless of political or religious differences. However, in Lebanon, the Hezbollah group publicly called for a boycott of the film. They accused Independence Day of being a Western propaganda product for depicting rival Middle Eastern factions cooperating with each other on screen. The memorable thing is that the film crew did not react in a political way. They simply replied that the movie did not take any sides. Independence Day just wanted to tell a story where humanity is forced to unite to survive. And looking back today, perhaps that is still the reason the film lives forever in the memories of many Americans. Amidst all the explosions, spaceships, and lasers, the core of the story remains a very classic belief that in the worst of times, people can still stand together like one big family. Number 10. The welcome helicopter scene caused a real flying saucer panic. One of the best things about the Hollywood era of the 1990s is that sometimes the boundary between movies and real life almost completely disappeared. And Independence Day created a truly unbelievable behind-the-scenes story like that. In the film, there is a very memorable segment where humans try to send a friendly signal to the alien mothership, using extremely powerful flashing lights from a helicopter. It was the kind of naive and hopeful idea very characteristic of American cinema at that time. But what no one expected was that when the film crew test flew the real helicopter in California, things immediately turned into chaos. The high-powered lighting system mounted on the helicopter created strange beams of light sweeping across the night sky. From a distance, it actually looked like an unidentified flying object hovering in the air. And as a result, over 150 locals called the police to report that they had just seen a real UFO. Imagine that moment in the mid-1990s. The internet had not yet exploded like it has today. Stories about Area 51, aliens, and flying saucers were still a pop culture obsession in America. Independence Day at that time was not just a movie, it felt like part of the UFO fever spreading across the country. Perhaps that is why the movie still feels very special when watched today. It brings back memories of a time when people still looked up at the night sky with childlike curiosity, and sometimes just a few strange lights were enough to make a whole town believe that aliens had actually appeared. Number 11. The United States military boycotted the film crew because of Area 51. Today, when mentioning Area 51, many people immediately think of internet memes, conspiracy videos on YouTube, or jokes about aliens. But in the mid-1990s, that name was still an extremely sensitive topic in America, and Independence Day accidentally touched right upon that forbidden zone. Initially, the film crew actually received quite positive support from the United States military. The Pentagon agreed to provide military advisors, allowed the use of bases, and supplied some real equipment to make the film feel more authentic. This was quite normal for many big Hollywood films at that time. But everything changed completely when the military carefully read the script section related to Area 51. In the film, this area is described as a secret base where the United States government hides alien corpses and spaceships from the 1947 Roswell incident. And at that time, the United States government still completely refused to publicly acknowledge the existence of Area 51 to the masses. Just mentioning this name directly in a Hollywood blockbuster was enough to make many officials uncomfortable. As a result, the military immediately withdrew all support for the film crew. The interesting thing is that this decision accidentally made Independence Day even cooler in the eyes of American audiences at the time. The film started to feel like it was telling a secret that the government did not want anyone to mention. And that is exactly the signature energy of 1990s American culture. An era when people were both fascinated by science fiction and obsessed with UFOs, conspiracy theories, and secrets buried in the Nevada desert. Perhaps that is why every time Area 51 appears on screen in Independence Day, it always creates a feeling that is half suspenseful, half like a whisper asking, what if this is actually true? Number 12, the rule-breaking line that offended Steven Spielberg. If you are a fan of American cinema in the 1990s, perhaps when rewatching Independence Day, there will be a moment that makes you laugh because of a strangely familiar feeling. That is when the character David Levinson, played by Jeff Goldblum, runs and frantically mutters, "Must go faster, must go faster." Sounds familiar, right? Because just 3 years prior, Jeff Goldblum himself said almost the exact same line in Jurassic Park while running away from a T-Rex dinosaur. Not only is the line the same, but his signature fast speaking pace, panicked look, and grumbling style were almost completely brought over to Independence Day. The interesting thing is that the audience at that time actually recognized it immediately. For many, this felt like a very fun inside joke for fans of Jeff Goldblum. But according to many Hollywood behind-the-scenes rumors, director Steven Spielberg did not like this very much. After all, Jurassic Park is one of his biggest iconic films, and having a signature line repeated in another blockbuster was seen as a kind of brand borrowing. However, looking at it another way, that moment clearly reflects the spirit of American cinema at that time. The 1990s was an era when movie stars began to carry their own persona from one film to another. The audience did not just go to see the character, they went to see Jeff Goldblum himself, with his very characteristic halting, intelligent, and slightly eccentric way of speaking. And honestly, it is precisely small moments like this that make those summer movies of the past feel much more relatable and memorable. Number 13, the exploding White House was a model, not CGI. Today, audiences are too used to explosions created entirely by computers. But in the summer of 1996, the scene of the White House exploding in Independence Day brought a completely different feeling. Something so real and so terrifying that the whole movie theater was almost dead silent. What makes that scene legendary is that it was not completely created by CGI, as many people still think. In reality, the special effects team built an incredibly detailed miniature model of the White House, about 4.5 meters wide. Every window, column, dome, and architectural detail was carefully recreated, like a true mini version of the iconic American building. After that, the engineers had to calculate the exact position of the explosives, the direction of the pressure, and the camera speed to create the most perfect explosion possible. The stressful part was that they only had exactly one single chance. Once the model exploded, everything would completely disappear. There was no undo button, no computer re-rendering. If the camera failed, the camera angle was wrong, or the explosion was not beautiful enough, the entire model worth hundreds of thousands of dollars would turn into a pile of useless ash. And perhaps that real pressure is what created the very real feeling on screen. When rewatching the exploding White House scene today, many viewers still feel it has more weight and destructive power than many modern visual effects. That is also the very unique beauty of 1990s Hollywood. An era when cinema was still mixing new technology with crazy handcrafted physical models. And sometimes, the very things built by hand and then truly destroyed in front of the camera create the most unforgettable cinematic magic. Number 14. The script was written in a record-breaking time of just 4 weeks. Today, many Hollywood blockbusters take years just to finish the script. But the unbelievable thing is that Independence Day, one of the biggest sci-fi movies of the 1990s, was written in just about 4 weeks. The idea for the movie was born when director Roland Emmerich and writer Dean Devlin were on vacation together. According to many behind-the-scenes stories, they started talking about the UFO obsession in America and wondered what would happen if aliens actually came to Earth, not to communicate, but to destroy us. That idea quickly turned into a burst of creativity. In just a few short weeks, they completed the first draft of the script with all the elements that Hollywood loved at the time. Global-scale disaster, American-style patriotism, lovable comedic characters, and emotional moments that made audiences stand up and applaud in theaters. The amazing thing is that as soon as the script was sent out, almost all the major movie studios in Hollywood immediately jumped into a crazy bidding war. Everyone wanted to own this movie. In the end, Fox was the winning studio after realizing the enormous potential of the project. And looking back today, that truly reflects a very special era in Hollywood. A time when just one idea big enough, high concept enough, could make the whole film industry go crazy overnight. Independence Day is not just a blockbuster movie. It is a testament to an era when bold imagination still had enough power to make all of Hollywood jump into the game. Number 15. The Friends star missed his chance to shine. When rewatching Independence Day today, many viewers often wonder what would have happened if Matthew Perry had appeared in this movie. The star of the series Friends was actually cast as Captain Jimmy Wilder, the close pilot friend of the character played by Will Smith. With his quick-witted comedic style and very 90s energy, Matthew Perry was considered a perfect fit for the role. But unfortunately, at that time, Friends was becoming the biggest television phenomenon in America. The grueling filming schedule of the series made it impossible for Perry to join Independence Day, and he was ultimately forced to withdraw from the project. That is one of the most famous what-if moments in Hollywood. Because if his schedule had been just a little different, it is highly likely that Matthew Perry would have become a part of one of the biggest summer blockbusters in cinematic history. The interesting thing is that although he could not participate, the Perry family still had a connection to the film. His biological father, actor John Bennett Perry, eventually appeared in Independence Day as an agent. Looking back today, that story feels quite touching. It reminds people of a time when television and cinema were still two very different worlds. Sitcom stars could rarely balance two massive schedules at the same time, and even though Matthew Perry did not appear in Independence Day, just imagining him alongside Will Smith is enough to make many 90s movie fans feel full of nostalgia. We have just walked through 15 secrets and unique incidents behind the glory of Independence Day. It is clear that the resounding success of the film came not only from the pioneering visual effects technology of that time, but also from the boundless creativity and passion of an entire crew that dared to overcome the toughest limitations. After 3 decades, that spirit remains intact, and Independence Day remains an immortal monument in the hearts of fans. Which secret from today's list impressed you the most? Please leave a comment below and do not forget to subscribe to the channel to look forward to more interesting videos.